Okay, the start of Aurora's skirt. What we've done is we've created a half circle pattern so that we can make a full circle skirt. So when you're cutting your half circle, remember to cut two pieces. Now then, for those of you who don't know how to calculate your waist measurement, I've written out a simple calculation for you to follow. Now Tracy's waist is 62 centimetres, so using a tape measure, measure your exact waist measurement and write it down. Then what you will be doing is dividing that measurement by pi, which is 3.18. So put this into your calculator. The measurement of your waist, and ours is 62, divided by pi, 3.18. Our calculation comes out at 19.5 centimetres, which we know is our diameter. To find the radius, that's half a diameter, you divide your sum by 2. Ours comes to 9.75 centimetres as the radius. So, get a pair of compasses and open it out to your measurement. In this case it would be 9.75. And when you've done that, take your compass onto your pattern, and then you will be drawing that circle with your compass for your waist measurement. And that is how easy it is. Now we're going to cut a full circle from the main material, and using your waist measurements you'll be needing to make a half circle again for your waist, and you'll be cutting two of these.
Okay, the colour I've gone for is pink cyclamen in colour number 563 from Aurora Fabrics. They also do a sample service, as you can see from the card I have here. Do many different colours and many different types of fabrics. And this is 100% pure silk satin, and that's how you spell the colour if you need it. And this is where you can buy it from, Aurora Fabrics. And that's off eBay.
Okay, the next part for both the petticoat and the top skirt is to sew up your side seams. And we're going to put a 6-inch zip, that's 15 centimetre zip, into the side seam. So I've measured down and I've put a pin. So for one side of your seam, leave this completely open and then close up your side seam, and that applies to your petticoat as well.
For my petticoat, I've bought 8 meters of lace approximately 1 inch wide. The lace I've bought is a slightly gathered lace, which will be perfect for going around the hem on a circular skirt. Because you have a curved edge on the bottom of your skirt, it'll be quite difficult to put a straight edge lace into that, so you need something that has a slight gather to the lace. I've bought this in ivory. The lace is called Broderie Anglaise, but you can use whatever you want if you want to put some lace around the bottom of your petticoat. Okay, what I have here is an 8-inch concealed closed end zip. I was aiming for a 6-inch, but I found it very difficult to get a 6-inch, so I had to go for 8. Okay, we're going to tackle this skirt a little bit differently, in that we're not going to have a back opening, we're going to have a side opening. So we take both your skirts, that's the petticoat and your outer skirt, and you will sew up one seam, side seam completely, like so, from top to bottom. And on your other side you will measure how long your slit has got to be for your side zip, and you will put a mark after you've done a trial fit to see if it'll go over your hips. You'll put a mark with a pin where you want your zip to finish, and you will start sewing from that point all the way down to the bottom. As said, I did want a 6-inch, and I'd already sewn a 6-inch, left a 6-inch gap, but we couldn't get a 6-inch zip, so we've had to, as said, go for the 8-inch. So we'll need to shorten the zip, so we're just going to show you how to do that.
Okay, that is where the bottom of the zip is going to be, and go down about an inch, and then what you're going to do with a needle and thread is just go over and over your zip several times where you want it to stop.
What this is doing is stopping the end of your zip coming out. Because it's a closed end, if we were just to cut the zip at that mark and your zip puller comes out, it is practically impossible to get it back in by hand, because these are made on machine. So what this is doing will stop your zip coming right off the end. As you can see, when you pre-buy one, this is done on machine, they put a stopper in there already. So this is just the hand method that you can use.
Now that we've created our new stopper, you can now cut off the rest of your zip like so it'll make it shorter for you.
There are quite a few tutorials out there on YouTube if you look for putting invisible zips in. It might show it a bit better than we can here, but we'll just go over it very quickly.
Okay, first of all, open up your zip, and then the whole thing will go upside down, and you're dealing with this side of the zip first. So line that up at the top and then pin that down. Okay, what I'm going to do now is sew this down using a zipper foot.
Which is a special invisible zip foot.
Right, I'm going to use the left hand channel because your zip is on the left hand side. So you start by flattening down the teeth and put it into the groove on your zip attachment. And carry on doing that all the way down to the zipper. The zipper itself, just go back a couple of stitches. And then cut that off. You don't need to force your zipper attachment into the zip fastener. Now that we've sewn on that side of the zip, we're now going to sew on this side. So you turn the zip back over and then over again so that the teeth are facing away from the opening, and you will sew it on in exactly the same position as the first side. So make sure that your zip lines up with the top of your fabric before you start. So this is what your zip should look like once it's sewn in on both sides, like so. Then you just give that a press to make sure your seam's flat. Once you've pressed your seam, so you've got a nice crisp seam, go to the inside of your zip, and on both sides here just attach your zip to the seam on both sides with a few tacking stitches. This will stop the zip from coming upwards when you're wearing it.
Okay, next we want to sew the two skirts together at the top. So you take your pink skirt, making sure the inside is facing up towards you and the shiny side is on the inside. You then want to pin your petticoat with shiny side up, and the dull side of your petticoat should be towards the shiny side on your outer skirt. You then pin across the top of your waist like so, and then we'll be sewing a sewing line just about a centimetre or so in from the edge all the way around from one end to the other.
Right, now that we've sewn the two pieces together, go to the inside of your skirt, and after it's been ironed along the top seam there, turn your seam over, and then that is going to be hand stitched to the inside of the zip. Now when you come to the bottom part, just here, the petticoat had a seam on the opposite side, so when you get to the bottom you'll have a kink in it. So what you've got to do is just give the material a snip up to your stitches so that you can turn the seam out the right way, and then this neatening seam along here will fold inwards. After you've neatened the lining to the inside of the zip, you'll need to do a row of overstitching at the top of the waist all the way round.
Okay, we're now going to hem up the bottom of our skirts. We will be starting with the pink one first, but we're just going to show you on this white one, the petticoat underneath. You probably notice if you've ever cut out full circle skirts about the severe curve it has along the bottom, and that how hard it is trying to turn a hem on a circle skirt, because the area on the outside of your skirt is bigger than the area coming inwards from the edge, and you're trying to force a large amount of fabric into a smaller space going up your skirt, and it doesn't work. You can probably turn in about 3 or 4 centimetres, and then you will start running out of fabric to hem with. So, I did some research on hemming up skirts, and you can find many tutorials like this if you type in hemming a curve on a circle skirt, and this one pretty much showed you 3 different ways of, just scrolling through this really quickly, 3 different ways of doing it, and I'm going for the bottom option, which is to overlock your skirt first. Okay, we have actually done the pink one just to show you, and this was one of the 3 ways on that website. You can overlock it. To overlock the edge, which actually pulls the fabric in because you need it on a tight tension. It actually pulls the outer edge in just a little bit as it overlocks the fabric, which makes it easier to then turn and hem up your skirt, because you're basically pulling by overlocking, pulling the fibres in just ever so slightly, pulling the fabric tight on the edge. So that will give you good ease to put it under the machine and do a normal hem. You can also use a method where you just run a stitch along your raw edge about a centimetre in, all the way around the bottom of your skirt, which also tightens it in. If you put it on a slightly tighter tension on your machine, it also has the same principle. But if you have an overlocker or serger, I recommend that because it worked out a lot better, and this was the practice run of that. So that's how to hem up a severe curve on a circle skirt. Okay, the next thing you want to do is to take your iron. Excuse Mum's giggling there. And just to press your hem, preferably with some steam, to help set that in place. You'll notice beforehand it's still a little bit wrinkly in places, which can't be helped when you're trying to hem up circle skirts, and especially satin, which doesn't like to behave very well. But once you give it a good press, you'll have a nice edge like this. Okay, last thing to do is to sew on the lace onto the petticoat. I bought about 8 metres of lace, and I sewed on about 7 metres of that 8. Then underneath we've just overlocked the edge of the skirt. I had originally bought this pattern to help me along with the Sleeping Beauty dress, and we are now going to work on the peplum. Now the piece they've supplied with the pattern actually tells you to do it in one piece with just a back opening. So this is what it looked like, and it said to do a centre fold on this line, and then there's your centre back. But after trying this, it doesn't actually sit properly, so what you need to do is put a side seam into the piece. So this is what we've come up with. I'd actually experimented with cutting this piece in half and then adding your seam allowance on. You still need the curve of the top of the piece to match your waist. And as I said, this is what we've come up with. We're still doing the centre front on a fold as instructions, and now we've got a side seam, and then we have this other piece for the back. Like so, so then you'll have your seam here, and then it finishes, and we're still going to have an opening down the back. So basically, as you can see, you more or less got the same type of pattern, but we've incorporated a side seam. And also, take note, this was way too short. By the time it was lined, there was barely much of a peplum there. So, as you can see, this was the centre back on this piece. And then what have I done on this one is I've just extended it down because it needs to be longer, and also taking note of some of the photos from the movie. the side piece is coming down. I'll use this piece here, coming down side over the hips, were longer than the front and the back sections. Only a bit longer, not too excessive, but it's something I noticed. So after a bit of trial and error and fitting pieces together, this is now what we've come up with. Okay, for the peplum I'm going to use this pink silk satin. I bought it from eBay from shop Happy Goodbye, and it was 100% silk charmeuse fabric in pink. I'm also going to be using this fabric to make my sleeves later on for the bodice. I've now cut out all my pieces, including the liner as well. Now you need to sew your side sections together as shown here on your outer fabric and your liner. The reason the side seams have been put there is because it helps it lie flatter as it curves around you, and it helps it lie flatter on your hips as well.
Okay, now we're going to put the zip into the back of the peplum. This is the right side of the fabric, and we have been lucky enough to have been given an open-ended invisible zip, which is impossible to buy out there, so you probably have to use an ordinary zip, but the principle will be the same. This one is way too long for what we need, so we're going to have to cut it down. When I'm measuring for the zip, I want to make sure that my seam coming down here will then turn just up about a centimetre. So I don't want my zip in the way of that seam, so I'm going to take it up just a little bit more so it's well out of the way, and then I'll cut my zip at the top of the fabric there. Now if you're going to have to cut your zip because it's too long, do not be tempted to move the zipper at all until you have done some over sewing of the thread of the teeth. So I'm going to cut it here, and then about 5/8 of an inch or a centimetre and a half, I'm going to get some needle and thread, and I'm just going to go over and over and over and over with my needle and thread, just to make sure that when the stopper does go up there, it won't go any further.
If you'd like any more instruction on that part of the zip, we did exactly the same on the main skirt. So if you check out that earlier on in the video on the skirt, you can see us sewing the zip to stop the end coming off. Okay, we're just pinning the parts of the zip on either side. Next, what I recommend, and also because the satin is so slippery, is to run a wide tacking stitch down to hold your zip in place before you sew it in properly using your zipper foot. Okay, next is the slightly tricky part, because if you've had experience dealing with satin, you'll know it never stays still and it's very hard to match up your lining. Basically what we've done now is we've got the good side to the good side of fabric, and we've just placed some pins temporarily to hold it in place all the way along, and a few here and there across the top. Next thing to do is to sew around the edges. Now you might want to use a zipper foot for this. Right, just to save confusion here, on this line on my left here, that's the tacking stitch that we put in earlier to tack the zip down. This line here was where the zip was actually sewn in. Now we're actually aiming to sew the layers together between this line and this line. So we've sewn right down the middle, and then at the bottom we've stopped before we put this dot, and then I've done 2 stitches backwards, 2 stitches forward. Turn the fabric around in your machine with your needle down, and then do 2 stitches forward and backwards again. And being very, very careful, because as mentioned, satin is a pain. Go right up and then do forwards and backwards, turn the fabric around and then carry on down, as so on. And it's very helpful to put some markers like this so you know you're aiming for just above the dots, or roughly as close as you can get. And this was a slightly more trickier side to do, but again you're aiming to sew up the middle here, and you probably have to end up pulling your zip puller out the way as you go. Right, first step is the cutting and the clipping. Starting from this left edge, cut right across. And remember guys, don't cut through your sewing line or you'll have to sew it all over again. Right, okay. Clip there, careful again, just below the sewing line. Click straight across, and so on for all the major points.
Now we're just going to cut off any excess material to get rid of any bulk. Okay, we've taken off half of the seam. Now down here where you've got your points, we just want to take away a little bit more extra material, so being very careful not to cut your stitching line. Just cut off a couple of these to get rid of that bulk down in the corner. Okay, having done that, we're now going to go to the inside points, and we're going to cut up to the sewing line, being very, very careful not to cut your sewing. So we go to the next point and give that a clip very carefully, and the next one. Like so.
Okay, the next thing to do is to sew a sewing line all the way across the top, about 1 centimetre in, leaving a good gap here in the middle. Don't sew on that part there, and start again from there. Sew right around to the other end and clip the corners at that angle shown. Next thing we have to do is clip the curve around the top. And then turn the whole thing inside out very, very carefully.
Okay, for the next bit we're going to push out the points. Get yourself a blunt stick like the end of a paintbrush maybe, but as long as it hasn't got a pointed end, and then use that inside your points to very gently push the point out like so.
Next thing you need to do is give the edges a press with the iron all the way around, and then I'm going to be hand sewing the final bit opening there. Okay, once it's had a good press, with the iron, and you've hand sewn that opening closed, it should look like this. I'll just show you what it's like over the skirt and then we'll move on.